Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show.
There are no membership fees in that sense, right? So it's really what it costs you as a company if you want to join is really time and your brain, if you like, because many want to join, and then we tell them, but look, this means each month we have meetings with a lot of homework, with tough papers and research to do, and so you really need to commit people to us with a lot of time and mandate from your company to really be part of these very dynamic work streams we're having.
I don't want to be accused of being a hammer, but if you think about it, IoT is the tech behind digital transformation. If your definition of IoT doesn't include data science like mine does, then the technologies at hand are IoT and analytics and AI. Industry 4.0 addresses this tech as well as the political, environmental, corporate, and academic issues that pave the way. In this episode of the IoT Business Show, I speak with Henning Banthien about the unique and effective approach Plattform Industrie 4.0 takes in digitally transforming the discrete manufacturing industry.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc. Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc. Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc. Business Show. This show is made possible by sales of my book, IoT Inc., published by McGraw-Hill, and the IoT Inc. Certified IoT Professional, or ICIP, online training and certification program. Become a certified IoT professional by completing the program's 3 courses: ICIP Technology, ICIP Business, and ICIP Strategy and Digital Transformation. Details of which can be found at www.iot-inc.com. That's www.iot-inc.com. With me today on the IoT Show is Henning Banthien. Henning is the Secretary General of Plattform Industrie 4.0, one of the largest international and national networks for the advancement of digital transformation toward Industry 4.0. He's an expert in areas of sustainability, governance, and of course, Industry 4.0. Henning, welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to be here.
So in addition to IoT, you mentioned digital transformation. What are the other technical elements in your view, in addition to IoT, for digital transformation in Industry 4.0?
What is important for the discussion we're having here is that if we look at and discuss, try to define what is actually Industry 4.0. So the one aspect is obviously we're really focusing on the future of manufacturing, the digitization of manufacturing. So the question is, what does it mean if industrial processes, productions digitize? So this is in essence what we're discussing, and this is a clear focus compared to other initiatives around the globe. But even within that focus, we always try to make very sure that we are discussing and looking at the broader environment of a technological development, because the digital transformation, Industry 4.0, means as well that we're going to have tremendous changes, for example, in the work, the field of work, future of work. How does work will transform? How do organizations transform? This is one contextual factor which is really important to look at. Or if you look at regulatory environments, where do we need to actually adapt regulatory frameworks which used to be right and good for the way we run our economy and we sort of regulate markets, but they will change in the future. So this is, for example, something else where we would look at, or research and development policies. So these are factors in the context, in the framework, the surroundings of Industry 4.0, of the sort of technological development, for which for us is very important to look at as well, to make sure this development is really going to be a productive and successful one.
Okay. So the actual digitization, I mean, I guess that's what I was originally thinking about, was the technology. But if we're thinking about digitizing the manufacturing process for Industry 4.0, then I was just trying to think what else besides IoT would be involved technically. But you're right. I mean, there's the human issues, which some people argue are even more challenging than the technical issues. And you also mentioned regulatory frameworks and R&D policies. But from a technology point of view, is there anything in addition to IoT or IoT for Industry 4.0?
No, that would pretty much cover it. I mean, if you look at it more, sort of the most recent debates, we're going to, at least in Europe, the discussion about artificial intelligence is one which is getting more and more prominent, which is good. But there again, we'd say, this is something about which we have been discussing and looking at in the past years as well, because if you look at machine learning, where AI is part of, this is also something which is very relevant for Industry 4.0. So that to us would also be a natural part of Industry 4.0. But, if that is your question, you could also argue, well, traditionally that hasn't been part of the IoT debate. So that could, you could frame that as something new. But for us, we think that AI is something that it very nicely fits within the framework of Industry 4.0 and is absolutely a new technological element, which will drive that development even further, and where we see very interesting potentials and also a very high level of competence within Europe.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's true, and I agree. And I think it is a matter of definitions. For me, I suppose you could just literally think about Internet of Things as being the things in the network. But for me, I always think of the Internet of Things as collecting the data, which is the things in the network, and then transforming it into something of value. And so bigger than AI, I would say data science, because that would be the superset, I would think, of analytics and AI. And so, I think if we break out the technology, we need to be able to use that data, do something with that data, and that's going to be by either applying traditional analytical techniques, or it'll be by applying, like you say, it's not so much AI, it's more machine learning.
Right. But in fact, that is a very important point you're pointing at. Because for us in the development, yes, on the one side, it is important to have good ways and means of how to capture data and manage data. But data is just data.
Exactly.
Data becomes interesting as soon as you're in the position to interpret it. And there again, we think that sort of the experience, the expertise players in Germany and Europe have, due to, the very high still percentage of industrial production we're having in the countries here, that is something where people here have a very high level of knowledge on how to interpret these data for production processes. So I think if you take this whole revolution we're having in the IT world, which we know very nicely from the B2C world, which Silicon Valley and others have very impressively shown what potentials are there, which is really great to look at. Now, if we merge that view to the industrial environment, then there are completely new questions coming up, and that is exactly about what can we do with those data once we have collected them, and how can we actually transform them into interesting new business models and then make them really attractive to entrepreneurs, be it from bigger companies or from smaller companies, and that is something also which is top on the agenda in the debate here right now in Europe. So what does it mean now really to put value, to put money to this digital transformation? Because in the past, many of those things we were discussing are basically wonderful concepts, but not a business reality, right?
Sure.
And that has really changed now, I think, in the last 2 years, 3 years. And so now we're really in a position exactly to explore these markets. And I think that's a great step where we are right now.
And I think just by the name digital, I think that does involve the virtualization of the physical. But of course, like you say, okay, then what? And no one's going to move to digital transformation just to move to digital transformation. There needs to be that business reason, and that business reason is central to the data that you collect. So I think we're right. So we're in agreement. And is that where the regulatory frameworks? You also mentioned regulatory frameworks as part of this package. Is that the privacy issue? Is there something more to it that you need to explain?
Well, it is privacy, and you know about the new regulation Europe has given itself on these questions.
Everyone knows about it now.
Right.
Thank you, and I mean that actually.
Yeah, right. I do
mean that.
It will be interesting to see how that influences markets. I think it's interesting that Microsoft has actually taken that up as a new sort of standard for their worldwide business, and not only in Europe. So that is definitely one part is the privacy one, but also security. That has a technological dimension, but it also has a regulatory one. The other really interesting and tough question is ownership of data. Sure. To whom do data belong once they are produced in course of various processes, be it just by simply driving a car, you produce tons of data. To whom do they belong? To the driver, to the car manufacturer, to the IT. So these are really interesting questions, and I guess nobody has really a clear and smart answer to that question yet. But that is definitely something where in the future, we will need regulatory answers to that, and those. Regulatory now in a very broad sense, right? This does not need to mean specifically a legal, government regulatory scheme, but that might be also incentive structure, whatever, So, but these are really core questions, I think.
No, and I think that kind of answers my next question. Not that I want to go too far into this, but the GDPR specifically is helping consumers, because they don't have a lawyer that goes with them. And generally Industry 4.0, which I'm going to ask you about the definition pretty soon here, but I'm assuming it's more industry. And then generally, where I've been involved, and I think it's just general the case, is that there's going to be contracts involved. And so there's going to be a contract between a manufacturer and their customer. In that contract, it's going to lay out pretty clearly, or it should anyway, lay out pretty clearly who owns the data, and then the other uses of the data. So when you say regulatory, I think it's not so much the policy or the legal, it's just making sure that companies do think about this to put it into these contracts. Is that kind of your thinking?
Right. This is exactly where we are at the moment. So for the B2B context, the assessment is exactly as you say. We can actually assume that once companies come together, they will have a deal on that. They will have a contract on that. But it's really something you can give to them to find a bilateral agreement on that. So there, at the moment, we don't see that we need an overall policy, new regulatory activities. But still, it's something to be monitored in the market if that is really going to be the case also in the future way of things developing. So this is something we still need to look at. And this is then really is the B2B relation, but then again, what we need to look at is, will we have specific clusters, monopoles developing, where some actors become that big and that powerful that actually the free market is disturbed in its way of functioning. So then those questions could potentially come up again. Right. So
right. No. Okay, I can see there could be a market distortion if some players are that big, and then maybe you need to, well, let's shift into Industry 4.0. Henning, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on yourself and your experience in IoT Industry 4.0?
Right. So my background pretty much comes actually from a management strategy perspective. And this is also that sustainability background. I'm sort of for my more or less entire professional career, I was always focusing on the question of transformation. Where do big transformation processes take place? So for many years, we have been seeing very substantial transformation processes in the field of sustainability, be it climate policies, energy policies, mobility, those are huge areas where sort of the practice of how we, generate energy, distribute energy, these things are changing. So, and always these questions are not only technological questions, they are questions for politicians, for regulatory field. These are societal questions. These are social questions. So to have a really systemic view on those transformation processes, and always to ask oneself, how do I manage properly such transformation processes so that we don't end up, in fights and struggles, in bad winner-loser situations, but actually that we are able to shape those transformation processes in a effective way, in a way that you won't have very harmful side effects. So for me, this new big transformation we're looking at right now, this digital transformation, is from that point of view again extremely interesting, right? So because as we have just discussed it, this is a technological revolution, but it's also for the business sector, for the business models, for the way how we run our economies. It is for politics. It's a big new challenge. For societies, it's a challenge. And then again, where I'm personally extremely interested in, I see a huge synergy between this digitization and sustainability. I strongly believe that many of the challenges we have with regard to climate change, the change in the energy sector, in the mobility sector, we actually can now run those transformation processes much more efficient, and actually also as a business case, due to the fact that we have new digital means, right? We haven't had them a couple of years ago. Yeah. So this is basically where I come from. Okay. So and now, sorry, no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so then sustainability then in this case is really the literal, I guess the more common meaning of from a, not just an environment, well, I guess I would say environmental and just make that a very broad definition, but you're saying this digital transformation in the bigger context is related to sustainability. It always has been, or business always has been, manufacturing always has been, but now that we can measure it and now that we can measure it and we have data on it, now we can actually relate it to our sustainability goals. Is that kind of the thinking?
Yes, exactly. We can be much more precise. And if you look at circular economy, the challenge always was, if I want to recycle something, right, and I have a product today, you don't know what's in the product. So you have a hard time recycling it because you simply don't know what are the materials in there. In the future, you can actually track those materials, so you can put a tag on a product and you exactly know what's the material, what's the mix of materials. You have that information, and then you can very easily direct that product in a recycling process. Or look at the management of energy systems. We haven't had the data, and we haven't had the technologies to govern a decentralized, distributed energy system. It wasn't possible. Today it's possible. So we can be much more efficient. We can organize. We know when people are using a lot of electricities, whereas other at the same time, for example, industrial plants won't use a lot. So they can give off their needs to homes, right? Whereas homes in those times where they don't need a lot of energy, so you can put these things, you can manage them much better than in the past, or the mobility sector as well. You can, with the new digital tools, you can govern the flows of traffic much better than you could in the past. So these are technological solutions we're having today, smart city concepts. Sure. You can now implement it, right? That wasn't possible a couple of years ago. So this is why I think there are really interesting opportunities now we can explore.
Yeah, and I think we're sort of getting more to Industry 4.0. So I'm just going to ask you now about the definition of it. But it sounds like from what you're talking about, it's the total product life cycle in the sense of the supply chain. But also now when you mentioned the recycling, for example, then when the product eventually is discarded and not used any longer. So, okay, so we're kind of, well, let me just ask you to be more explicit. So what is the definition? Please describe, Platform 4.0 and then for us, the definition and so forth.
Right. So if you look at the broad IoT world, that was, where we started our conversation. There you would look at many different fields like health, logistics, mobility, the energy sector, whatever. This all is going to be digitized. Right. The IIoT, the Industry 4.0, is really the focus on the manufacturing sector. And this is also, where with the colleagues from the IIC, the Industrial Internet Consortium, they, from the beginning, they had this cross-domain approach. They said, look, we're looking for solutions which would actually be relevant, for the mobility guys, for the health guys, for all of those. And we said, look, no, we're going to focus only on this manufacturing slot. This is, because this is where Germany is strong. This is where Europe is strong. This is where we start. By now, after 3 years, we have many solutions ready to go, ready to implement, from the standardization to security to technological solutions for that specific slot. Manufacturing, digitization of industrial processes.
And this sounds like it's, and you're looking at it from a bigger perspective as well then.
Yeah. So now those solutions, you could argue, they are, as a prototype, they actually work for the other domains as well, right? So now we're actually starting to look into the process industries, the chemical industries, for example, and we have intense discussions now with them. And they say, well, look, this is great what you've developed. Actually, we can transfer that in our sector now, in our domain, so let's do that. So this is now starting, but Industry 4.0 in that strict sense really means digitization of the manufacturing.
Okay, and when you say manufacturing, then what you mean is discrete manufacturing, and now you're expanding into process manufacturing. Right. Yeah, no, I think that's good for everyone listening, is because I know that, well, for a while I was kind of confused between Industry 4.0 and then an IIoT, and what was the difference, and I think that's the key. The key is the manufacturing, and then specifically, it started out as being discrete manufacturing, because that is if you look at Germany in particular and Europe, I guess in general, there's probably more of that than process manufacturing, but it's expanding now into process manufacturing.
Right.
And it's looking then, as we were talking about earlier, it's not just I'm asking, I guess, but I'm asking it in a kind of a different way, but it's not just the manufacturing process that Industry 4.0 is looking at. It's also the supply chain. And I guess this is a question, it's also getting those materials to manufacture, and then what happens once they've been manufactured. Is that correct? Or
right.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's correct. And that is also, I think, a very interesting part of the debate we're having, that, traditionally you, as a company, you'd have a couple of partners with whom you sort of, you have a close interaction. Now what happens in the digital world is that, first of all, the number of those partners raises, right? Because you have much more partners you could potentially work with, because they it's easier to interact with them and to include them in the ecosystems. Exactly. And this very word of the ecosystem nicely illustrates that you now have to have the capability to network with them, cooperate with them. So what the traditional view of having the sort of a specific linear stream of production transforms itself to ecosystems, networks of production, right? So this is, from a management point of view, it's something new. From a organizational point of view, it's something new, because what is then the boundary of an organization? If you follow the idea of a digital ecosystem, it means that a company gets more and more really part of an ecosystem, closely interlinked with other partners. So it's part of a network. Mm-hmm. And this is something, then the culture, the organizational setup of a company changes, right? To me, that is really something very important to look at. And again, as we have discussed in the beginning, yes, at the core of it, it's a technological change. But if you really want to have the successful implementation of it, you need to look at those, for example, organizational changes you're having due to the fact that you are working within closely interlinked networks.
Right. Okay. And so you're saying the supply chain is maybe kind of an old-fashioned way of thinking about it, and it's kind of more like a web, a network.
Right. A supply network.
Like a supply network. But not just supply, right? It's supply transformation now. And now we're talking about transforming atoms instead of, bits, but supply, transformation of that raw material, and then consumption, and then death. I'm not sure what the term is, but once it's discarded, right? Yeah. We're talking about like a web of that entire process. It's like that is a life cycle, right? I mean, from birth to end of life.
Right. That's this cradle to cradle thing, if you like, right? Right. Cradle. Thank you.
Oh, cradle to grave. Yeah. Cradle to grave. Yeah.
Right. But then, the new idea is actually, can I close those loops, so that actually you once you design a product, you from the beginning on, think about how to recycle it. So how to make sure that you have actually closed loops of material flows, so it's not that in the end it's just dumped somewhere, but you can reuse, right? Because you have a transparency about the material flow. And if that would work on a large scale, the economy would be much more efficient. The energy use, the resource use of materials, that would drop significantly. And in fact, we're seeing that already. We have many examples where you implement Industry 4.0 solutions. You have, 30% less resource use, because it's just, you can be much more efficient in doing what you do.
Yeah, and it gives you a bigger picture. I mean, I think you're looking at it from a bigger picture point of view. And so if it doesn't cost anymore, for the company, it's certainly better for the country. And I guess maybe trying to align those two might, I don't know, maybe it's not a challenge. I mean, I think if you look at it the right way, but then you have to look at, the motivations. I mean, for the company, they're going to want to create it as efficiently as possible. And it'd be great if we could recycle it. The country, the union, whatever the case may be, they would love that recycling. So, I mean, but I think really there's correct. I don't think it can necessarily cost. It doesn't necessarily have to cost more as long as you have that data up front, then you can plan for it.
Right. Well, and you can even make a business case out of it. I think in many instances, if you look at it in the right way and see this, as you said, if you see and understand the broader picture, I think you can actually even save costs. So you're actually it's a direct benefit to your business. So that's the one thing we're seeing. But I agree with you. It's obviously, since there is a added value to from a national point of view, from a government or a societal point of view, there, we come back to what we had earlier. What are incentives, structures, or regulatory frameworks you want to give to ensure that those societal additional benefits are also possible, right? And then actually implemented. And then again, that's then more sort of the political debate we need to have, I think.
No, very interesting and valuable, and I think exciting. Now, is Industry 4.0, is it limited to Europeans? I mean, I know it's obviously that's its origin, but we've got listeners from all over the world that are listening to the podcast, and say they're in the US, say they're in Asia. Are they able to participate, or is this really is it a union, a European union thing? No.
The whole exercise only makes sense if you think it on an international, worldwide level. And the very notion, I mean, that is was a sort of a surprise for us, a nice surprise. Be it in other European countries, but also be it across the world, in Mexico and other places, they talk also about Industry 4.0, in their languages. So this very idea is taken up, and China, as a prime example, or Japan, South Korea, as examples for other countries who are heavily involved in sort of the industrial sector. Australia, another partner of ours, they really, and some of them really paste and copy what we did and set up very similar activities. We have very close interactions. It's really, Japan, South Korea, China, Australia, Europe, the Americas, in the fields of security, in the fields of standardization, because the players within our activity, the Platform Industry 4.0, they are many, actually all of them, they are very international players. Sure. Those are the Boschs and Siemenses of the world, everybody knows. But there are also these, famous German hidden champions, the medium-sized companies who are very active on an international level. So for them, as you said, it's something that started here, but it's only really worth it if we scale it on an international level. And this is why for us it's really important that, especially in the field, for example, standardization and security, these are things that, to our understanding, they are pre-competitive. It is to the benefit of all of us if we have a shared understanding of standards, so to make sure we have a harmonized language for machines to talk to each other, right? If we have sort of the USB that was a revolution, right? That made it much easier, right, to interconnect our devices. And if we come to something similar for the machines, right? For the industrial applications, I mean, that'd be great. And this is what we really are pushing. And we have made now great success, great steps forward with our international partners really around the globe, because we think this is something really of benefit for many countries around the world. And same is true for security, really. I think we have an absolutely shared interest to always make clear this is something which we really can run securely, right? And so, Facebook crises, they don't help any of us, right? So just to take one example, but others have suffered as well. It's not really, did not want to blame a company here, because this is a challenge we all share. And that is why we need, for all of us, good solutions to that.
Yeah. And I think, this digital transformation, if we look at it and we kind of pull out, there's kind of two different types of players in this world, and we can look at it in a binary way. We have the digital native, digitally native, and these are the Facebooks. These are companies that are creating value online. And then we have the physically native, and we're really talking about the physically native who are now moving into the digital, realm. And now they have to take into account these issues like security and privacy, which is the business counterpart to it. But I want to circle back though on the concept of Platform Industrie 4.0. Now, when I ask you about international, and you're saying yes, it's international. Are you referring to the concepts and the ideas, or the group? Because I guess I'm picturing Platform Industrie 4.0 is a group. 4.0 is a group that you join, and that was the initial, thinking behind the question. So, yeah, is this a group, and can people from other countries join the group, or is this a concept that you're just trying to spread around the world, which makes sense?
Right. Well, actually, it's both. But the platform, so the concept, that is Industry 4.0, right? The group, that is the Platform Industry 4.0,
that's the group, right?
Yeah. Which is a living network of
it's
companies.
A membership-based group,
yes,
right?
but not in a legal sense. So it's really an open network. Everybody can join, and in fact, we have the German companies, obviously, but a GE is in there, an IBM, a Hewlett Packard, Huawei, Cisco, Mitsubishi, Hitachi. They are all in there, very active. GE, for example, is a very important partner for us in the standardization field. And many of those companies, actually, they have their research, their prime research labs on Industry 4.0. They are located in Germany, right? So, same is true for German companies. They are very active in the IIC as well.
Sure.
And that's great, right? Yes. So it's an open network. There are no membership fees in that sense, right? So it's really what it costs you as a company if you want to join is really time and your brain, if you like, right? Sure. This is what we ask from them, because many want to join, and then we tell them, but look, this means each month we have meetings with a lot of homework, with tough papers and research to do, and so you really need to commit people to us with a lot of time and mandate from your company to really be part of these very dynamic work streams we're having. And if they're willing and able to do that, they are more than welcome to join.
Okay, and so that's interesting. So there's no membership fees. However, there is the fees in terms of time. And what is your requirement then when, let's say, a listener of this podcast knocks on the door of Platform Industrie 4.0 and says, we want to join? You'll tell them we need one person full time, 20% of a person full time. What's, for everyone listening now, what should they be thinking in terms of the commitment that they have to provide in return, to be part of the group?
Yeah, well, I can only say it depends, right? So what what I'd offer or suggest is that anybody interested, just please have a look at our website because there you can see what are the working groups where we are active in. There in the first one is standardization. We have one on research and innovation. We have one on security, on regulatory frameworks, on future of work, and on the future of business models, platform economy, data economy. So these are the 6 groups we're having at the moment. So the first question, I think, to an interested party is, are there any of these topics where I'm interested in? And then if you are, simply get in contact with us, because then it really depends on the work stream, on the specific aspects within those work streams. Standardization is huge. There are tons of subgroups in that working group. And then it depends, where exactly do you want to engage yourself, and then we can discuss what the effort would be you'd need to bring to the table. But in general, for us, it is important, high level of expertise, really a person that then in continuity engaged itself, and that this person has a clear mandate by the company that they can contribute to our discussion.
Okay. And other consortia and groups and foundations, if you take the average, when you squint your eyes, they're saying around probably 30% of a person's time. If you were to look at an average, does that sound about right, or a little bit low, a little bit high?
I think that's a fair take. I think sort of for average people, I think that should be a fair estimate. I think it also need to be said that there are some persons, companies engaged where they really would commit 1 or 2 persons entirely to drive the processes, and be just for a specific time span. So that is true as well.
No, that makes sense, and I think the second part of this equation, and I'm just looking at it strictly from a return on investment. So the investment in this case is going to be time. And of course, there's going to be the large organizations that are going to have multiple people dedicated to this because it makes a lot of sense for their business. Smaller companies, they want to be part of this, and smaller could be medium, and let's say it's around 30% of someone's time, to kind of be the bare minimum to be effective and to be able to contribute. Yeah. Now, what do they get in return? So they apply a person for 30% at a time. What are the business advantages? What are the technical advantages? Of becoming or being accepted? It sounds like being accepted as a member.
Right. I think the one thing is it is a highly profiled and interesting network of other people, right? So I think it's simply in terms of making sure you're at the sort of top level of an exchange and knowledge building. That is one return you definitely have. Also, with regard to being able to monitor what is actually happening in this transformation process, in society, in politics, in the marketplace. What are the transformations, the changes we're looking at, and what does that mean for me to react, and how do others react? So I think this is a platform, a network to exchange, to learn, to discuss. Since it is pre-competitive, this is really a very trusted environment where people come together knowing it's pre-competitive. Here we can openly speak and interact with each other. So this is something I think really highly valuable. So you can learn for your own business. So that's and also then the recommendations. which you can all read in our online library, by the way, which has download numbers of way over 100,000 downloads just in 6 months we had on the documents we published. So there you can see, these documents are interesting for companies, for other governments, associations, whatever. So you learn for yourself. But these downloads also show that publications these working groups come up with are highly relevant in sort of shaping the future way of how we do this, right? Because others read this, take this up, and so you are sort of a major player in that discussion, right?
Yeah, thought leadership.
Exactly, it's thought leadership, and you are part of that as an author. And then, sort of, the last aspect I'd say is really the interaction with politics, right? And this is in Germany, in Europe, but also due to these very close cooperations and intensive cooperations we have with other countries, and other countries for the platform always means this interaction has a government relation, but it also has a business relations. It's always both, right? Or in most cases, it's both. So there again, I think that is something very important for companies that it's sort of how to shape future markets, if you like.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I would expect definitely being part of this high level network. Value there, of course, the contacts, even from a business perspective, the knowledge being on the forefront, being seen as a thought leader. I did not expect you to say, though, the political connection. So that's that's probably just looking at it from a Canadian American kind of perspective. But in the European Union, there's a lot of borders. Now, I know they're open, but there's still a lot of borders, meaning there's a lot of countries. And so can you expand it a little bit on this? Are you saying this is a way to open the door to business contracts, or what does it mean? What's the net result of these political connections, at least what I'm calling political connections?
Right. Well, no, it's not, to start with that, it's not contracts, right? Because that is why we're pre-competitive. But I think, and it's good, very good question, because that is different to other sort of political cultures. Within the platform, in the platform are engaged companies, research institutions, labor unions, right? That is important to us, and politics, and they sit at the table every meeting. So they are part of the discussion. So it's a day-to-day consulting of politics, right? And politics can bring in their perspectives, and they are directly worked upon. And this is true nationally, but this is also true internationally. For example, for Europe, we have a close cooperation with France and Italy, and with the European Commission at the table as well. And this is sort of meant to be a speedy group, right, to push debates forward much quicker. With that, to influence and help the European development overall, because we want this to be European. But as you said, many European member states, many people to discuss with. So we said, let's have a smaller group here to drive things, to be quicker, but then in the end we want them to be European. So what the net benefit then is, you are part of that political debate on how this digital transformation will look like, how markets will look like in the future, how regulation will look like in the future. And that is, again, as we started in our talk, these are frameworks which are very important for the future success of business. And being part of the platform, you are part of that debate.
Yes. Okay, and when you frame it that way, then it's leading me to think that this would be more for multinational companies. Like I'm thinking, if I'm a mid-size American company and I sell to Europe, but I don't know, maybe correct me there. I mean, is it? I guess at first glance, when I hear this, the first reaction is this makes a lot of sense for larger companies that need to understand the politics that are, that are that large that it's not like they just have distributors in Europe. They're active there. They've got employees there.
Exactly.
Is that a correct characterization for the types of companies? So I guess where I'm going with this is what's the, the typical profile if you're, to join.
Right. The bigger ones, or the very international ones, put it that way, right? And that is, for the German case, many of our medium-sized companies are heavily international, right? So they largely sell abroad.
They have no choice. They have to be.
That's the other one, right? So I agree. If you're a US-based company, for example, and you only produce and develop for the US market, we are less relevant. Obviously, right? But as soon as you are an international, you heavily are involved in international markets, then I think it's relevant to think about us.
Okay. And I'm kind of like drawing the line almost where, and I'm just thinking, being, let's say I was a CEO of a company. It would be if I'm just selling, because I'm not going to sell to Europe. So if I'm just selling, I have a distribution network there, maybe a country, head or something. Maybe it's not as good a fit as if I had a whole division there. Maybe I acquired a company there. Maybe I have a team there, employees, a large number of employees. Maybe I'm kind of making too much of this, but I'm just, again, for people listening, they're listening to us right now and they're going, is this right for me? And I'm just trying to cover the different parts. There's going to be how much time's invested, and then also the relevancy, I suppose, the return on that investment, and then I guess what we're talking about is the relevancy here. So maybe another way to ask that question, what's the average size company, or do you know that what that's actually participating?
Well, that variety is really high. So we have a company, they are 100 people, 200, so really small, right? But extremely innovative, a great example of Industry 4.0. And this guy mainly works abroad, right? And he sells his machines and new solutions really on the international market. And then, we have Siemens and Bosch and SAP and GE and Huawei, so the span is really high.
Helps so. Yeah, this helps so because I think, 100 to 200 person company being a small company, and everything's relative, but that being a small company, I think, that helps. That helps, right? That helps clarify things a little bit. Now, what about the technology? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but what I'm hearing loud and clear is an ecosystem, as we talked earlier. This is an important ecosystem. This is, if you're in this, there's all the benefits that come with an ecosystem. Now, there's going to be some technology that needs to support that ecosystem. Is this a free for all? If we compare it to the IIoC, the Industrial Internet Consortium, they've got frameworks, that people are adhering to. Can you speak a little bit to the technology? Is there anything that's common, or is it kind of up to everybody to decide?
In which sense do you mean technology now? Sort of the tools we use within the platform to organize ourselves, or?
Like if I think about this ecosystem, by definition, we're going to have a technical underpinning to be able to communicate. Right. The different products need to be able to communicate with each other. So, in one way of thinking about it, it could be an IoT platform. It could be a cloud platform. Right. But there has to be some connectivity, that there's the business underpinning, which are the business models and so forth. But there's the technical underpinning. And that's what I'm wondering, because, we all bring our different products to the table. But as we know, in IoT, in Industry 4.0, it takes more than just one product. You have to bring all these companies together. So how is all this technical stitching together happening, or is this something that's sort of hands off?
Well, on sort of in terms of how we manage ourselves within the platform, it's really very easy. Working groups, meeting of the working groups, workspaces online, virtual workspaces, documentation places where all the files are in, where every member can sort of has an access to, and where we share all the information.
So let me give you an example. So I have a product.
Right.
And my product measures workers. So instead of measuring the machines, it has a wristband and it measures workers. Now, in itself, it's not going to be a value by itself. It has to communicate with machines, has to communicate, with the different products that are going to be in the factory, let's say. So now, how do I make that connection?
No, right.
So in some cases, there's going to be a technical platform that says, okay, this is the API, this is the middleware you use. So to be able to talk to this machine, you just have to communicate with this language. Is there something like that, or is it more hands off?
Right, that's hands off. Right, that was the second part I wanted to say. This is, since we are strictly pre-competitive, we do not enter that sphere. Right. So what we do, we work on basic concepts. We, for example, developed a number of scenarios to illustrate how products and solutions like you were just talking of would interact. How would that look like? How could we?
But at a higher level then.
That's right. It's abstract. It's the scenario.
Got it.
We don't do that sort of in as a platform on our. So, for example, we don't have we don't bring companies together as platform and make them work collaborative on specific solutions. We don't do that.
Okay.
Because then, it starts not to be pre-competitive. So having said that, what we do, but that is then a spin-off of the platform, we have started a labs network, Industry 4.0. This is only supported by companies. It's a very close ally, but it's a spin-off of the platform, but it's not managed by the platform, because they run use cases, test beds. They do that, right? So there's a very close link, but we say once you really want to try it, that's a different activity, right? Okay. We like that. We applaud, but not as a platform. This is why we started the Labs Network, right? We have also started a standardization council on Industry 4.0, because we as a platform, we work on standards, but we don't define and set standards ourselves as platform, So we have started this new body, this council, which pulls together all the relevant information and then carries it to the circles and groups on an international and national level, where actually and specifically standards would be defined, right? So this is then a sharing of work, who's doing what. So
okay. So this is interesting, because sometimes, and I guess it's probably just the English speaking, but when I think of Platform Industry 4.0, I think of and there's obviously different meanings of the platform.
Right.
Now you've used the term pre-competitive a couple times. I think it's relatively self-explanatory, but maybe what does that mean? What does pre-competitive mean? Because you have brought that up a few times.
Right. It's important to us, because you always need to face, we meet very often, and meeting means ABB sits next to SAP, next to Siemens, next to Bosch. These are all partners, but also competitors in the market. Right? Or GE and Siemens, right? So, but they meet within the platform to discuss about security, standardization, etc. They can only do this if it is pre-competitive. It's not allowed from a legal standpoint, but it wouldn't be good for the productivity of our discussions within the platform if we start actually talking about things which would be directly relevant to the marketplace. For example, common products. We wouldn't do that, because that would be a competitive exercise, and some of them would get engaged and others would be closed, or they would be not allowed to access that discussion, and that doesn't work as an open platform, right? So we need to be very clear on what are topics suitable to our agenda and discussion because they are pre-competitive, and what are topics we wouldn't take up because we see that if we discuss them and if we drive them a little bit further, we'd be actually talking about solutions for the market.
And that's where you draw the line then.
That's where we draw the line. In the end, we want that, right? But not as a platform. We are happy as soon as the companies do that. But that's the company business. That's business in the market. That's not the work of the platform. And thank you very much for clarifying. If I talk about platform here for the Platform Industrie 4.0, what I mean is a network of companies, of actors, labor unions, as I described it, coming together to drive that discussion. It's not a technical platform. It's not a business platform, right? That's not it's not the meaning in this case.
Got it. No, that makes sense. And I think that's important clarification. And also, this is very unique because I've spoken over the years and I've been a member of, and I've had clients that are these consortia, these groups, these foundations, and commercialization is up there. It's very important. And this is a very different perspective. It's a broader perspective as we started the conversation, because you're looking at it in the context of an economy, an economy, however large you look at it. And it's this pre-competitive, I think, is an operative word here. It's pre-competitive discussions. It doesn't mean that it's not going to lead to the technology. And I want to get the links to the lab network so we can put in the show analysis notes, among other things. It doesn't mean that it's not going to lead to business relationships because, hey, you meet with people, you get to know them, and then you find out. But still, the mandate is pre-competitive. And that is, that's very unique, I think. And it is being financed, obviously, by, I guess that's my last question, but it must be financed by the government, obviously, right? Because it has this broader view.
Right. And thank you for summarizing it that very nicely. And yes, that also is sort of the platform had a history in the first 2 years of the platform. It was actually driven by the three most relevant associations, industry associations, and only on the basis of their own resources. And then they realized it's just becoming too much work, too influential, too important. We don't have the resources to do this alone, right? And also with regard to the fact that there are such a heterogeneity of players around the table, and if we want to have also the labor unions on board and all those competitors and all those international players, this is a very tricky management and facilitation challenge, and this is better to be done by a neutral body, right? And this is why government came in and they said, okay, we understand this. We need to take care of that. We finance this. And this is also then why I come in, right, sort of as somebody who has no stakes within a company, in the whole management body of the platform. We are strictly neutral. We don't have any stakes in any company.
Right.
We are not part of any association. We just are there as neutral brokers to manage that platform, and that's the reason, as you exactly said, why government finances this.
Like it. All right, Henning, where can people find out more about Platform Industrie 4.0?
Visit our website. Just Google Platform Industrie 4.0, and then
because I have to tell you, I kind of had a hard time. I'm going to put this in the show analysis notes, so you don't have to memorize this. Just go to the notes, and then we'll have the link. But I have to tell you that I had a hard time finding the actual organization. Even when I did a search, and maybe I wasn't using Platform initially, I was just using, and I was using, I think, 4.0. But it wasn't.
Okay,
because it's not. Any case, we're going to put this in the show analysis notes. But is there a specific URL?
Yeah. Well, so I'll just read it out, but that would be great if you could. Yeah.
No, I definitely
post it. The address is now Platform, and then in the German writing. So that's the one challenge.
Yes.
With 2T, right? So it's Platform, not with one T.
That's probably why.
Two, right? And then it's -I40.de. Germany,
Okay.
right? And if you type that in, then you're there. But yes, obviously I understand if you Google it from abroad or whatever you use, then you might need a couple of steps.
Yeah, it didn't come up initially for me, and I kind of knew a little bit of what I was looking for too. But
that's
anyway, for everyone, no problem. It's just be some feedback too. But for everyone listening, of course, if you didn't remember that, the 2 T's and the dash and the then we'll have it in the show analysis notes. And also, I think this lab network, we'll probably include that as well. You don't have to give me that URL, but we'll include the URL to that and anything else that you think would be useful to everyone listening. So, Henning, this was a pleasure and also very enlightening. I myself can say I now understand, not everything, of course, but I understand Platform Industrie 4.0 a lot better than I did before, and I'm sure everyone listening does as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Bruce. Bruce, that was a great talk, very helpful for me as well. And yes, I hope there were some interesting information for the listeners. So thank you very much, Bruce. Great.
Okay, that was a good talk with Henning Banthien. This podcast goes vertical, deep diving into different topics each week. If you prefer a more horizontal and structured approach to learning IoT business and its orbiting technologies, check out my book IoT Inc., published by McGraw-Hill, or become a certified IoT professional by completing the ICIP training and certification program. For details, just go to www.iot-inc.com. Also go to www.iot-inc.com for an analysis of this episode, links to things that were mentioned during the episode, and very importantly, the episode's PDF transcript. Just search for the name of the episode or the guest. If you're new to this podcast, subscribe. That way you'll get every week's episode delivered straight to your device. Or, if you've been listening for a while, there are 3 ways you can support the show. You can leave a rating or a review on iTunes. Just go to iot-inc.com/iTunes. It only takes 1 click to leave a rating, a little bit longer to leave a review. You can share it on social. I'm on LinkedIn, to a lesser extent on Twitter. And of course, you can support this show by buying my book, IoT Inc., or the ICIP training and certification program. It's how I pay the bills. Next week's episode is Ecosystems and the Open Connectivity Foundation with David McCall of the Open Connectivity Foundation. I hope you can join me then. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Till next week, may your path to IoT business be a digitally transformed one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc. Business Show.